So, first of all, thanks to Luis Jimeno, de Cultura del Videojuego, because he put me in touch with our guest. So we send him greetings from here. Here we go. Let's start an interview that I'm really looking forward to as a follower and investigator of history of video games. And of course, a great fan of mysteries, because I'm really excited to listen to the person who joins us today. Dr. Andy Reinhardt, it's a pleasure to meet you. How are you?
Hello, thanks so much for having me. I'm doing well.
Okay, so, well, please, Andrew, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Andrew Reinhardt. I'm a digital archaeologist who works in the physical world, and then I'm also a physical archaeologist who works in the digital world. I'm currently. I know it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. It sounds complex for me.
Yeah. No. To keep it on the simple side, right now I'm a professional archaeologist working in the Great Plains of the United States for Metcalf Archaeological Consultants. I'm a principal investigator, and I study historic architecture, and I also study prehistoric Native American stone features and lithics and things like that too. So very traditional. But when I come home, I fire up my PlayStation or my Xbox One or my mobile and play games. And it's really interesting to me to explore the archaeology of digital space. And so I didn't start out as a digital archaeologist. I started out in classics. I worked in Greece. I worked in Italy. And then later on, I came to find that digital space is what really interested me the most.
Okay, so, well, you mentioned that you have an Xbox, a PlayStation. Are you playing right now with which video game?
I am finally in the end game of Elden Ring. It's taken me about it's taken me about 100 hours to get all the way, and it's not good.
It's really hard for me.
Yeah, the game is terrific. There's so much archaeology in that game. It's amazing. But which is the reason why I started to play it. But at the same time, it's ridiculously hard.
Yeah. Well, but I think it's a beautiful one, awesome graphics. But yeah, like I said before, it's too hard for me. I don't have enough time in order to beat a game like that. But well, finally, I always back to Pac-Man, Space Invaders, well, all the classic video games, because I don't have enough time to that kind of games. Well, Andrew, can you explain to us the archaeogaming term?
Sure. So I'm not the first person to study video games archaeologically, but back in 2013, I created the term archaeogaming. And I wanted to have it describe the intersection of archaeology in video games and archaeology of video games. So, we're going to talk about the Atari excavation in a little bit. And that is a good example of doing archaeology of video games. We're actually in the real world, and we're digging up e-waste, electronic material, game data, and stuff like that. And then as far as archaeology inside games, so for example, like in Elden Ring, other human players can leave messages. Other human players will leave shadows of themselves when they die. And it's exciting to me to go into a digital space and see evidence of human players and what did they leave behind for other people to find. And so, for a lot of my colleagues also, they study how video games talk about culture and antiquity and archaeology. So if we're playing Lego Indiana Jones, what does that look like for archaeology? How is archaeology portrayed? If we're playing Tomb Raider or Uncharted, any of those games, what does it mean? And how does it feel when you loot something or break something, steal something? And we can talk about the ethics of archaeology in those kinds of games as well. So it's a small word for a big topic.
Mm-hmm. So had you ever played, Andrew, Ultima Online?
No, I never did. I actually first started really thinking about archaeogaming playing World of Warcraft. and seeing all of the ruins in the game, and there's so much lore. Even when the game first started, they had so much lore that was built in by Blizzard Entertainment through the Warcraft series and whatnot that it's like, wow, I think there's something here. And then I played that, for a few years, and that really, got me thinking about archaeology and video games, and kind of developed my thinking along the way.
Yeah, I think Ultima Online was a kind of prequel for this kind of game of MMO. I remember 20 years ago or more, I don't know, interacting with other players. It was so interesting because you can build things or you can destroy things.
Yes.
And it was like a permanent damage if you want to destroy the world. So I think it was interesting and maybe related with your topic, with your passion,
Oh, absolutely.
So, well, you have published 2 books on archaeogaming, Archaeogaming: An Introduction to Archaeology in and of Video Games, and Practical Archaeogaming. I apologize because I don't have any of them yet. I have to fix that soon. Sorry.
No problem.
But well, a couple of books. I assume there are a lot of things to tell about archaeogaming, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And so, with the first book, Archaeogaming, back in 2018, I wanted to basically make an introduction for people to say, to read about how archaeology works in a digital space. The main concept in that book was that video games and virtual worlds are artifacts, they're archaeological sites, they're archaeological landscapes, and they're all that at the same time. So it's like a digital trinity, So you have a game like an ET game that we excavated, or any kind of game really, and you can hold it in your hand. It's got media, it's got a CD or a diskette. Well, not anymore, but way back when, certainly you had this media, and it was an artifact. Somebody made this, somebody produced it. It's an archaeological site because on that disk media, you've got code, you've got read-write saves, you've got notes, and you can actually dig into that software to see how a game is produced. And then it's also a landscape, because when I play a video game, especially the games that I really like to play, which are RPGs, role-playing games, open world games, or MMOs, things like that I can actually go into the game and do archaeological research through my avatar. And so I wanted to write a book about that and explain that, games aren't just toys. They're actually places where people go and spend hundreds and hundreds of hours, and millions of people do this every single day. And they leave evidence behind of where they were and what they were doing. And to me, that's archaeological. For the second book, Practical Archaeogaming, I wanted to give very specific examples of how to do archaeology in digital space. So, for example, there's a chapter that has a whole lot of info on Fortnite. So if you've played Fortnite, you know that you are up against 99 other players in a given 20-minute contest where you're fighting each other, and it's the last person standing, and you can build things to protect yourself as you go. And I was really curious to see if I could do an archaeology in a space that only lasted 20 minutes. You have the Roman Empire, which lasted, 1,000 years or whatever. And then you've got Fortnite, where your empire is 20 minutes long. But at the same time, people are in there, they're interacting with each other, and they're building things and destroying things. And, well, what does that mean? And what does that look like? So that's an example of a practical archaeogaming project.
Yeah, so interesting. So are they available in Spanish?
Yeah, the first book is. It was translated, and it's available in the Spanish language, and it was produced in Spain. So readers can find the Spanish edition fairly easily. If you just Google archaeogaming, through Google or whatever, you'll be able to find it.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's split this interview in 2 parts. First of all, we are going to talk about something I am holding in my hands right now, a Atari cartridge, very special one, the ET video game. Well, as I said before, I am an investigator of video game history. I have given some talks. Also, I have published a book about mysteries, urban legends, called Expediente V, Misterios y Videojuegos. The point is that I think the topic of the Atari cartridges buried in the desert is the ultimate example of both fields, mysteries and video games. So, well, Andrew, please tell us about how it all started, about the main motivation to embark on this adventure, the search for the Atari cartridges in the New Mexico desert.
Yeah, of course. For those listeners who don't know the story, basically back in 1983, Atari buried nearly 1 million video game cartridges in the desert landfill near the small town of Alamogordo, New Mexico. And because this happened before the internet, and yes, there is life before the internet, the truth of the burial got forgotten. And it became an urban legend focused on the Atari game called E.T. the Extraterrestrial. By the 1990s, this game had earned the title or reputation as the worst video game of all time. And it didn't take long for some people to come up with a theory that Atari was so ashamed of this awful game. And they had so many unsold copies and so many returned copies that they decided to bury it. And they're going to bury it in the desert. They're going to crush them with machines. They're going to cover them with cement like it's some kind of evil thing. And, you know, people then forgot that this actually happened. And so it became an urban legend. It became a myth. You know, as far as the archaeologists and how we got involved with the project, first of all, I wanted to thank Joe Lewandowski from the city of Alamogordo. He's a garbologist. And Zach Penn, who is the director of the documentary Atari Game Over with Lightbox Entertainment. And they asked us to come and excavate. And, you know, we knew that the burial had happened. New York Times published an article in 1983 about the burial. And because nobody knew really how to use microfiche readers, nobody went back and looked at that research. And what's really funny is that somebody actually did. They posted it on a Usenet forum, and people thought it was fake. They're like, oh, that newspaper is fake. You're lying. You know, it couldn't possibly be true. And so anyway, you know, we were interested, you know, basically to see what the artifacts could tell us, you know, about the video game crash of the mid-1980s. We wanted to learn more about Atari's corporate history and practice. What do they do with obsolete material? We wanted to learn what happened to e-waste when you bury it in a desert. You know, does it decompose? The answer is no. We also wanted to record the feelings of nostalgia felt by people who attended the excavation over those 2 days that we were there in April of 2014. So lots of questions, lots of answers. And it was just such a weird project for us to do because nobody had really done an archaeological excavation of games or really of e-waste of any kind. And so, you know, it was just brand new for everyone.
Yeah. So I think the expedition attracted a lot of media attention. So
yeah,
that's obvious. So how did you manage the pressure of public and this media attention in this journey? I think it was so difficult. All right, we were there for a couple of days doing the excavation. The first night we showed up, we saw Ernest Cline. He's the author of Ready Player One. He showed up at our hotel driving a DeLorean from Back to the Future, and he had an ET doll in the passenger seat. And I'm like, oh my god! So all of a sudden, he had these like rock stars showing up to watch us dig in the sand, and that was kind of crazy. All the hotel rooms were full of people who decided to come. When we got up on the day of the excavation, where we actually found the games, we were driving in the morning, dawn. You know, everybody's sleepy, and there are hundreds and hundreds of people waiting online to get into a dump, you know, to watch archaeologists do their work. Come on, you know, that was just crazy. And you know, the fact is that as we were doing the excavations, and especially once we started pulling up Atari games, including E.T., one of the documentary film producers came over to us and showed us his phone, and he's like, "You're globally trending on Twitter." And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. It's like, so, you know, it was insane. And the fact that, you know, archaeologists don't dig in front of people. We dig in front of each other. We don't dig in front of an audience unless you're like on Time Team, you know, or a TV show like that. Yeah. We, you know, had no idea, you know,
games media journalists from all over the world who were there to watch. We had local news and national news with cameras and everything just there. And I was extremely nervous. And I think the rest of the team was really nervous too, because, it's like, oh my God, we're under a microscope as this thing is happening. And we're trying to figure out how to do this as it's happening. And, but the interesting thing is, after about an hour of starting the work, everything kind of faded in the background. And we were able to focus and actually try to do some science while this is happening. And so things calmed down, after the first hour or so, and we were able to actually get to work and do something interesting.
That was awesome. So, well, Atari Game Over, like you said before, was the film in which we could see the result of your work. Well, when we watched the film, I think it's a super film, especially for retro video games lovers. But there is one question we all ask ourselves, and the question is, what would have happened if you had dug in the desert and found nothing? I suppose that is something you ask yourself too.
Absolutely, it was. Now, when an archaeologist goes and excavates anything, it doesn't have to be games, but just anything, we try to do our research and make sure that we have a pretty good idea about where to excavate, and we have a pretty good idea about what we might find. Joe Lewandowski had done a lot of homework and research. He was present when the games were buried in 1982, 83, and then he forgot kind of where they were. And so he was able to look at photos and use georeferencing to kind of figure out where to dig. But we weren't entirely sure. So I'll tell you a secret. I don't think I've told anybody this, but we showed up a day before the excavation happened, and we had a piece of machinery called a bucket auger, which is basically a big giant drill on a crane. Okay. And we sank augers, and these are basically holes that are about a ½ meter wide. And we drilled into the earth about 10 meters down. We dug about maybe 7 or 8 of these, just to see if the drill would find anything, and it did. And so all of a sudden the pressure was off. It's like, oh my God! So it brought up cartridges, pieces. It brought up game boxes, and we're like, we're gonna dig here tomorrow. So make sure the excavator goes here and starts digging. But that's normal. We call these shovel probes or auger probes in a real archaeology when you're digging in, in Spain or something like that, where you do a test, and if the test is positive, you excavate, and if it's negative, you try someplace else. So we felt a lot better about things.
Yeah, it was like a spoiler.
Yeah, we didn't tell anybody. We didn't because the director's like, don't tell anybody. We got to keep the tension.
That's obvious. Yeah.
And so when an archaeologist is teamed up with TV people, that's what happens. Is sometimes we know what's going to happen, but they need to have the drama for their film. So like, okay, fine, have the drama. It's okay.
For sure. Yes. Awesome. So, well, you found a lot of games, not only ET, other kind of games, or I don't know, consoles maybe?
We did, yeah. Actually, we found, gosh, maybe 40, 50, 60 different titles, not just ET, but other games from Atari from the late 1970s to the early 1980s. And then we actually found pieces of consoles too. So we found parts of Atari 2600s. We found parts of Atari 5200s, which we didn't expect. We found controllers that had the wires cut, which meant that Atari had done this before the burial to make sure that nobody could bring these up and either sell them or use them at home. We found other controllers for tennis and other controllers for Star Raiders. And, basically Atari would sell this hardware or these peripherals along with the video games in some cases, so that you could actually play, these other titles. And we didn't expect to see any of that. And so it was really cool for us to find hardware mixed in with the game cartridges and boxes.
Yeah, so things that were left over in some way. That's curious. So, well, Was there a particular piece that held a special significance for you?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. First of all, as an archaeologist, we're always looking for inscriptions. We always want to find writing and a date associated with a find. So that tells us how old something is, or when it was put there. And we actually found a newspaper article from the Alamogordo Daily News from September of 1983 reporting on the dumping of the games. And we found that newspaper article on top of Atari cartridges. And so it was crazy. It was basically like seeing, going to Egypt and finding a stone saying, here is the tomb of this pharaoh. And underneath that inscription, there's the tomb of the pharaoh.
So like a tiny stamp.
Yeah, it was nuts. I mean, that never happens. And so being able to find that was amazing. And then the other cool thing that we found that had a special significance for me is I found a coupon for the Atari game Raiders of the Lost Ark, which came out in 1982. And this one preceded E.T. And was like one of the first video games based on a film. And so finding Indiana Jones' picture on a piece of paper advertising the video game for Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark in an excavation of video games that was pretty crazy too. So
kind of Inception.
Yeah, precisely. It was really strange.
Well, Raiders of Lost Arks was developed by Howard Scott Warshaw too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Spielberg certainly took notice and brought him back for the other game. Yeah. E.T.
Well, a couple of years ago, I had the pleasure of speaking with Howard, with the creator of the E.T. video game. What can you tell me about him?
Yeah, we didn't know much about him. We did have a chance to meet Mr. Warshaw at the excavation, but we only had a minute or two of his time, and he was great. He was curious. He wanted to see what was going to happen, and I wish we'd had more time with him, but we had to get to work. But then, like, seeing the documentary later and seeing his reaction when they gave him a copy of the game that was from the excavation, and watching him kind of tear up and reflect, that was a very special moment for us. And when you do archaeology, a lot of times you don't see how it affects people on the other side. And so being able to do this, particular excavation and then seeing Howard's reaction, that was awesome. And we felt really good about it.
It was a genuine reaction.
Yeah, it was. No, we were touched.
So Howard told me that if he had the chance to develop the game again in 5 weeks, that's the time he gained, so he would do exactly the same thing. So that's amazing.
Yeah,
I don't know what's your opinion about the video game.
I played it. I didn't think it was the worst video game of all time. I think that's unfair. People just say that to say it, and I'm sure there are worse games now, even photorealistic and whatnot, that are just terrible. But you give somebody 5 weeks to make a narrative and do the design and come up with everything, and to come up with what he did was terrific. And there's a lot of thought and a lot of symbolism that was going on, and a lot of callbacks to the film, and so it was pretty good. And yes, it was frustrating not to know where the holes were where you'd fall in, but so what? I'm playing Elden Ring and I'm getting my butt kicked every time I log in, time after time. So I'm frustrated with that game, as good as it is, as I was with ET. So it's okay.
I totally agree. Yeah. So, well, the Atari cartridges buried in the desert was for a long time the most popular urban legend in the history of video games. That's obvious.
Yeah.
But in some ways, your expedition turned the legend into reality. My question is, how does it feel?
I'm amused. It makes me laugh a little bit because, again, it shouldn't have been an urban legend, but it became one, and it became so big. And usually when something becomes so big, it's just, there's no stopping it. But it was great to actually go in and find the games and to give some resolution to those people who had been following the legend, and it really kind of blew their minds. They're like, "What? It's real! It's real!" And I'm like, yes,
At last, yeah,
it happened. So that was I mean, it was a lot of fun for us. And after the fact, and I don't think many people know this either, is after the excavation was over and we'd been publishing and newspapers had been writing about it and everything, there are some people who are like, you faked the excavation. You put those games there on purpose, and then you went back and you dug them up for the movie. And we're like, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
You know, those games were there for you know, since 1983, and so 31 years later, we came back and we excavated them, and it was dangerous, and they had safety people, and yeah, you know, there could have been a lot of problems. So, but it was just hilarious to find people saying, no, you made it up. Absolutely.
That's interesting, but it's a kind of conspiracy.
Yeah. Oh, everything's a conspiracy. You know?
Yeah. Right.
You want a conspiracy, you can make one up right now. So yeah, they thought it was a conspiracy too, but most people believed it, and those people are right.
Yeah. So Andrew, about the objects that were found, have they been preserved in any way?
Yeah, you know, so we were there. We didn't keep any of the games just because ethically, as archaeologists, you know, that's not something that we do. However, we were able to, on the day after the excavation, we went to a garage owned by the city of Alamogordo, and we had a chance to look at everything. So we dumped out all of the bags for everything that we had collected. We had about 1,300 games that we pulled up out of the 800,000 that were there. And we sorted them. And so we found the best examples, and we said, these are going to museums. And so Smithsonian, the Henry Ford Museum in the US, the Strong Museum of Play in the US, Vigamus, which is the video game museum in Rome. So it's across from St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. You can go to Vigamus, and they have a permanent exhibit with sand from the landfill and games from the excavation. And so a lot of museums have this for study. It's on exhibit for the public to see. And then the rest of the games, the city of Alamogordo actually sold on eBay. And so
Really?
yeah. Well, you know, first think about this. I mean, the games were discarded, so they're treated as trash. They belong to the city. They're younger than 50 years old, so they hadn't really officially got a National Register designation yet. And you know, so the game, it was decided that the games would be sold on eBay by the city. And the city then took the money and helped refurbish the Historical Society Museum in town, and they built a new gallery. And so that money went back to the public and went back to infrastructure and museums, you know, that were local as well. Yeah. So it was nonprofit for sure. Yeah. And then for those collectors who wanted to, some of them paid like $1,300 for a copy of E.T. from the excavation, and then. Yeah, they kept putting these up, and then I think the least expensive one, there was like a copy of Centipede that was like for $20 or something, and they're still floating around. You can still find them on eBay. Yeah, people recently.
Well, I bought this copy, so I don't know when. I don't remember, but I don't think it was so expensive. But well, it's for me, it's so special, and that's obvious.
Yeah.
And what about you? Did you keep some copy? Or?
No. I thought about buying one after the fact, you know, but I never did. We didn't keep anything. It's not appropriate for archaeologists to do that.
So the famous sentence from Indiana Jones, that should be in a museum. No, it's right. It's true.
And, yes, and they are. You can go see. You can go see them.
Okay. So, well, moving forward, are there any other projects or excavations related to digital archaeology that you would like to start?
Yeah, there's one in particular, and again, it's a matter of finding funding. First of all, after excavating Atari, I became really interested in e-waste and recycling and disposal, and I'm very concerned about environmental impact and human impact on e-waste. What does that do to people? And so there's the site of Agbogblashi, which is near Accra in Ghana, which is the world's most notorious dumping ground for digital waste. And it has not been studied archaeologically. And I'd love to be able to go and, you know, year after year and basically have archaeological seasons going through the e-waste, talking to the people who are doing the recycling and documenting the human and environmental impact that e-waste has on local people who are responsible for dealing with it. So that's a big project that I'd love to do.
And a nice one.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's move on to the second topic. In this case, let's talk about a film that was very special for fans of video games and sci-fi. We are talking about Tron, the 1982 film, a film that changed the rules forever, I think. In September, we will have the chance to go to an exhibition in Seville at the Arcade Planet building called Tron Genesis. So I think it's a good time to talk about this legendary film. So, Andrew, I think you mentioned in a previous interview that watching Tron on video was mind-blowing. Well, I agree with you. That's my opinion too. That's logic. So it sparked your interest in computers and electronic music too. So how did it inspire your interest in these topics?
Wow, yeah. So Tron came out in 1982. I was 10 years old. Okay, and everybody knows when you're like 9, 10, 11, those are the most important years when you're developing what you're interested in. And so my parents did not let me go see it in the movies. And I was just so sad. I saw the trailers. I'm like, I have to see this. And like, Mom, Dad, it's a Disney film. And it's like, nope, you are not going to see that movie. So I had to wait for my friend to get it on VHS. And so he got it on VHS video cassette. And he and I were computer geeks anyway. He was doing pixel art already in 1982. I'd started figuring out how to do computer music, basically programming in BASIC. And so between the two of us, we always get together and have sleepovers and play computer and all that. And we play Atari, we play in television. And with the film, you know, I finally saw it and I didn't know what was going on. But as soon as they got into the cyberspace, you know, all of a sudden you've got the light cycles going around and you've got these flying robots everywhere and you've got this super bright colors and people in suits with you know, these flying discs and robots and all kinds of just amazing stuff. And it's like, what is going on? What is happening? This is amazing. And, you know, the fact that this was a video game too was just mind-blowing because, you know, you play Atari and it's just 8-bit, you know, going around on the screen, and all of a sudden it's like you can be in a world with other people. It looks real. And that was fabulous. And you know, and then listening to the music and listening to the Tron theme and stuff and having that electronic music mixed in with the orchestration and stuff. Wendy Carlos just did some amazing work on that. And you know, I'm like, I have a computer and I can make music too. And so I kept bugging my parents for music composition software. And finally, you know, when I got into high school, I got a music composition software program for our Macintosh. And I just sat there every day after school, just composing. And it wasn't very good, but I was doing it. Now I do it now as my hobby. So yeah, you can find my name is Cyphernaut, CYPHERNAUT, on Spotify, Apple Music, and Tidal. So I've got records up there, and it's electronic music, you know, that it's just all over the place. So yeah, that brought me to this moment in time, seeing that film.
I love electronic music, so I will hear you your songs on Spotify.
Thank you.
So, it was a quantum leap, I think, Tron itself, and was ahead of its time in exploring a bunch of concepts like virtual reality, artificial intelligence. So how do you think Tron has influenced this kind of developments, VR, AI, or even the metaverse?
Yeah, you know, it's always been a fantasy for players to want to actually be inside a video game or a virtual world. But instead of embodying it physically, I mean, first of all, it was cool to see photogrammetry show up in 1982. That is to say, they scanned an orange and brought it into the game. And they do that now. Like you play Assassin's Creed, and that stuff that's in there, they've scanned and brought into the game. It doesn't disappear from the real world. That's kind of silly. But the concept of actually scanning something and having it in space to use was super, super cool and really ahead of its time. And that was wonderful to see. Actually, for my PhD, I did it backwards. I was playing Skyrim, and I scanned a pickaxe in Skyrim inside the game, and then I printed it in my 3D printer outside, which I don't think had been done before, to take a digital artifact that's two-dimensional and then make it 3D in the real world. So we went back the other direction. So that was pretty fun. For other kinds of things, we're dealing with like digital objects, and so you got weapons, you got vehicles, and then those are in the game, and you're driving them around, and you're interacting, and the fact that you actually had a visual interface that also facilitated communication between players, and you had conflict, and you're working with data, and you're working with visual objects and all of that stuff. That was just absolutely fabulous, and to have Tron kind of put all that forward. And the other thing regarding artificial intelligence, it's a cautionary tale, and I can't think of a movie that I've ever seen where AI is good. It's either amoral or it's evil, or it has its best interests. Any of the Alien movies you watch, including the new one, that stuff's going on. We had 2001: Space Odyssey that kind of started it, but then Tron kind of took it to the next level. And the AI is basically teaching itself and teaching itself and teaching itself, and it gets bored. So all of a sudden, instead of playing chess, it wants world domination. I want to play with the government, and so you see Tron as a cautionary tale, one of many, but one of the first.
Yeah, well, I think there are a lot of concepts in Tron that were mentioned in previous books, sci-fi books, for example. But I think Tron was the first time we saw it in video, in cinema, So it was amazing for this reason, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
The date on which Skynet was supposed to wake up and crush the humans has been recently passed, Nothing happened, I think. But anyway, how do you think the relationship between humans and machines has evolved?
Oh, boy. So archaeology really is the study of the interaction between people and tools and places. And so that's true. If I have a rock and I turn it into an arrowhead and I use that for hunting in the landscape, then okay, that's a good relationship. It's very practical. Okay, I need to do something. I need to feed myself, so I need to go hunt. In order to hunt, I need to make a tool, and then you've got that. But now things are a little bit different and a little more complicated. Because the relationship between humans and machines, which is cybernetics, it has this emotional dimension now, this kind of psychology to it, where we are creating things to make ourselves feel a certain way, as opposed to just doing something practical. So we make AI, and some people will actually fall in love with the AI. You remember the movie Her, but that's actually happening in real time. People are falling in love with their chatbots.
Sure.
Why not? We made ourselves social networks, which had the best of intentions, but became fuel to create fires and all of this stuff. And so the relationship is super complicated now between humans and machines, and we keep trending in this kind of negative direction. I think people can argue the opposite. It's never too late to turn back, and it's also never too late to turn off. I did digital archaeology, and I still do, but now I spend 80% of my day outside, touching grass, working in the physical world, and then at night I come home and I work on this other stuff. But it's not all the time for me anymore. And I deleted most of my social media accounts because I just got tired, Yeah. And so, what good is a digital tool? What good is a machine if it affects your mental health negatively and if it makes you tired all the time? So no, thank you. I'll do something else.
Yeah, we are digitally tired in some ways, I think.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, we talk about the Atari ET excavation, but if a similar excavation were possible in the Tron universe, what kind of remains would you expect to find?
Oh, actually did this, if you can believe it. There's a game that came out a few years ago called No Man's Sky by Hello Games. And
awesome. And also music.
Yeah, yeah.
I love
65 Days of Static is one of my all-time favorite bands, and it's one of the best soundtracks for a video game ever.
Amazing.
Plus it's procedural, you know, so the music is procedurally generated along with the game. So basically you're using maths in order to create this audio design for the game as it's being created right before your eyes. So as part of my PhD, I studied a human civilization called the Galactic Hub, and there were actual ruins of the human settlements inside that game that had been buried because of a climate change event. Basically, Hello Games had released an update, and the update broke all of the planets. It basically changed planet climate. It changed the animals that were on there, the plants that were on there, and it buried player bases. And the players couldn't get back to see them. But for me, I was able to go and find where these players were living. I could visit where they had built, and I could excavate using the excavation tool in the game. And all of a sudden, I was putting this stuff up on Reddit and sharing it with the group, and they were like, "Oh my God, I haven't been able to see this base. I miss it. It was my favorite place." And we're actually doing archaeology inside a digital game, looking at what other human players had done. And it was real archaeology. We were asking real archaeological questions and doing actual excavation and creating maps and videos and photographs and all of this stuff. So no, absolutely. And yeah, it was astonishing. And there are other people who are doing that now with other games as well. So it's not just me, and it's not just this game. It's colleagues going out into cyberspace and finding other stuff to do their archaeological investigations in.
Well, I think No Man's Sky is a unique video game for many reasons, but the case that you explained, I think, is one of the most interesting cases I can remember in a video game. I mean,
yeah,
so it's amazing. Well, the Hello Games are developing more expansions. I think I don't know if they have finished it or not.
No. They're still going. They just released version 5. I was a day one player, and they just released version 5, and it's been like 5 years since the game came out.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, well, about music, because you mentioned you are a musician in your free time.
Yeah.
And I think, well, the Tron music influenced your creations, but maybe can you mention other artists that you like to see, for example, or to hear, for example, the 65 group of No Man's Sky would be an example, but
God, one of my favorite all-time soundtracks was by the group Berlinist. They did the music for Gris. If you played Gris, it's a mobile game by a Spanish company.
Sure.
Yeah, and so listening to the Berlinist soundtrack, it's beautiful. It's electronic, but also there's a lot of piano, and
so relaxing. Yeah,
super chill. For a game that's mostly jumping puzzles, but is beautiful and made me want to play the game because the music was so good. And then as far as like Tron goes, that came out in 1982, and you got Wendy Carlos' soundtrack, and also what else came out in 1982? Blade Runner, with the soundtrack by Vangelis. And so you hear that synthesis, that synthesis from Vangelis, and then that's already having an effect because you've got new wave music coming out, you've got electronic dance music that's just getting started, bands like Depeche Mode and either New Order or Joy Division and those guys, and then it's also having an effect on other kinds of music and musicians too. So like, for example, Yes. Back in the 70s, you have Rick Wakeman, Tony Kaye, and they're playing this kind of classical, music, but it's on Moog synthesizers and B3 Hammond organs and whatnot. And then in 1983, they released 90125, and they're one of the first bands to use the Fairlight synthesizer. And their album cover is computer generated, and their videos are computer generated, and it's totally vaporwave. And when you watch Tron, that aesthetic is vaporwave too. And so, you can't help but think that there's some kind of connective tissue between, the digital music and the digital culture, and the film, especially Tron, that came out in '82 to help kind of push all this along and to make people realize this is something they could actually do.
Yeah, it's like to jump into another universe, definitely. I like the music from Unreal Tournament.
Oh wow! I haven't played that game in a long time.
yeah, but because it's totally unavailable right now. You can't play online in Unreal Tournament, and it's so bad. But
no, that game was so much fun. Man. Two frags left. Yes.
I remember the translation to Spanish because, well, when there was a headshot, in Spanish, the translation said "disparo de cabeza." It's bad translated.
Yeah.
No, disparo la cabeza. No, disparo de cabeza. That's curiosity. It's funny. It's a fun fact. Andrew, looking at the current advancements in VR, in AI or metaverse, where do you think we are heading in terms of digital archaeology?
Yeah, this is a really exciting time. I was born in 1972, which is the same year that Pong came out. And so I'm as old as video games. And so it's been exciting to grow up with the video games growing up right by me. For some archaeologists, they talk about digital archaeology, and it means basically using digital tools to do archaeology in the real world. So GIS mapping software, laser scanning artifacts. But for me, digital archaeology is actually doing archaeological investigation and asking research questions about digital things and about digital places. And so, that's where I would hope that things are going. And, when you talk about digital space, everything from social networks to video games, virtual worlds, we're on our phones all the time. And especially since COVID, there's more use and more migration from the actual world into the digital space. And when you have millions of people migrating into the digital areas, they bring everything with them. They make things inside these places. And because they're making things and having conversations, and they're having emotions, and they're creating, all of that leaves behind this kind of archaeological residue. It leaves behind artifacts, and it helps us understand, how we are and what we're doing as a species moving forward. And that's one of the bigger archaeological questions. What makes humans human, and how have we changed, or have we changed at all? So that's where I really see things trending. It's one thing to say, oh, well, this game is about ancient Rome. Isn't that interesting? And it's another to say, here are people who are building within the space, and they're creating their own empires. And what did those look like? And how long did they last? And it has endless fascination for me.
Yeah. So, Andrew, do you know Gris or Green, the video game that you mentioned before?
Yes.
Do you know any other Spanish video games?
No.
Oh,
I am sorry. I'm so Anglo. So it's American or UK or Canadian. I would love to play more games that are from other countries in other languages. And Gris was the first one that I tried, and I would love to do more.
Okay, well, maybe I can recommend you in another time.
Please,
several video games from here.
Please do.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, we are coming to the end of the interview. It has been exciting. Thank you very much for your time. I would love to see you in Spain one day. Maybe show my collection of Spanish video games.
I would love that. No, I love Spain. I've been twice, and I can't wait to come back.
Okay, so well, maybe the next time. Andrew, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you soon. Take care.
Okay.
Adiós, amigo. I know that you speak some Spanish words.
No, thank you. Muchas gracias.
Okay, Andrew, say see you soon.
Adiós.